They did not grow up in broken homes. They were not neglected, not abused, not ignored. They grew up in homes full of love, open doors, creative energy, parents who questioned everything the system told them. And somehow, they ended up more anxious than most of the kids who grew up with strict rules. No one explains why, but the pattern is there, and it is more common than people think. For decades, psychologists focused on one type of difficult childhood, the cold household, the absent parent, the home where love had to be earned. But there is another type, one that does not get studied as much. The household where everything was allowed, where rules were seen as oppression, where freedom was the only value that mattered. These homes were not bad homes. They were homes built on a real reaction to something painful. It started in the 1960s. The counterculture movement changed how an entire generation understood authority. Vietnam, Watergate, the civil rights movement. People stopped trusting institutions. They stopped trusting rules. They stopped trusting anything that told them how to live. And when those people became parents, in the late 60s and through the 70s and 80s, they carried that distrust with them into their homes. They had grown up under rigid control, Catholic guilt, military fathers, suburban silence where no one talked about how they actually felt. They felt trapped, suffocated. They watched their own parents sacrifice everything for a system that never thanked them. So when they had children of their own, they made a decision. Their kids would never feel caged. And they meant it. They removed structure. They removed expectations. They removed consequences. They filled the house with music and art and open conversation and told their children that life was meant to be felt, not controlled. For the parents, this felt like healing. But for the child growing up inside it, something quiet was happening. A 2016 study published in the Journal of Child Development found that children raised in low-structure households showed higher levels of ambient anxiety by age 7, even when the home environment was described as loving and emotionally warm. The researchers called it the paradox of permissive parenting. Too much freedom, without enough containment, does not teach a child to feel free. It teaches them to feel unmoored. Because here is what most adults forget about childhood. A child does not experience a rule as a cage. They experience it as proof that someone is paying attention. When a parent says, "Be home by 6," the child hears, "Someone cares whether I come back." When no one says anything, the child does not think, "I am free." They think, "No one noticed I left." These children rarely act out. They do not throw tantrums. They do not break things or demand attention. They become still. They watch. They observe. They figure things out on their own because no one is directing them. They pack their own lunch. They put themselves to bed. They learn to read the mood in a room before they can read a book. By the time they are 10 or 11, adults start calling them mature for their age, and everyone treats it like a compliment. But psychologists have been observing this pattern for decades. They noticed it first in military families, then in households where both parents worked long hours. Then, gradually, in a very different kind of home, the kind where no one was working too hard or staying away too long, the kind where everyone was simply too busy being present for themselves to notice the child needed something more. Much later, this pattern received a name: parentification. It is a clinical term for when a child quietly assumes responsibilities that belong to adults, not because anyone asked them to, because the environment made it necessary. And it happens most often not in cold homes, but in homes where the adults are so emotionally open that they forget to check whether the child is okay. These parents talk about feelings constantly. They cry in front of their children. They share things no child should have to hold. They vent. They process out loud. They treat the child less like someone who needs protection and more like someone who can handle it. Not out of cruelty, out of a genuine belief that honesty is always better than silence. The child learns to manage emotions that are not theirs, to stay calm when the adults around them are not, to become the steady one in the room. And they do it so well that no one ever thinks to ask how they are doing. A 2019 study from Columbia University found that adults who grew up in this kind of environment were significantly more likely to struggle to identify their own emotions, even when they scored well above average on emotional intelligence in social situations. They could read anyone in a room. They could not read themselves. And this is where the pattern becomes harder to see. These are often the most functional people in any room. They organize, they show up, they hold it together. They are the friend everyone calls at 2 in the morning. But underneath the competence, there is a quiet exhaustion that never fully goes away. They have been holding things together since childhood, not because they chose to, because no one else did. And over time, many of these people stop expecting consistency from anyone. They say things like, "I do not need anyone." They say it with pride. They built that independence early, and they carry it like armor. But it is not confidence, it is caution. Because they learned, before they had words for it, that the people closest to them were not predictable, not absent, not cruel, just inconsistent. Love that was always there but never reliable is one of the most confusing things a child can experience. And the child does not process that confusion consciously. They just quietly stop reaching for it. So they grow up, and they become adults who build walls, routines, schedules, rigid plans. Not because they love control, because somewhere along the way, their mind decided that the only way to feel safe was to build the structure no one else would. And that is not a flaw. It is an adaptation. A very logical response to a very specific kind of childhood. The question is not whether something went wrong in that house. The question is whether anyone living in it ever noticed. Because these children did not need less love. They needed love that came with something steady underneath it. And now, years later, they are building that steadiness themselves. One routine at a time, one boundary at a time, one quiet decision at a time.